Testing, testing. Yeah, now it should be working. Good thing I put my screen somewhere over here. I have like an extra screen so I can see it. I think it might be quite interesting actually at some point to show you guys a little bit more around the studio. You can see it's like it's a busy setup, right? There's a lot of things going on, but anyways, there's also a screen over here that's showing me like if my mic is working or not. So we get like a really good idea on that. Cool. All right. So what are we going to do here now today? So we talked about our design here, right? And just a quick summary for anybody that might be just joining us for the first time. We are designing a hospital design, very inspirational design. And the point here is first to show you the full-on design process of how I use Blender for design purposes, and then design something nice and beautiful, right? And really to show potential designers like yourselves, potential architects, how Blender can be useful for architectural design, right? Because I mean, you know, I swear by it at this point, right? But a lot of people don't see the benefits yet. And that's the point, really. Besides like the really cool, small, short, technical videos that we have that show like some of the very specific design workflows in Blender, it show a more general and generic design process. And that's what we're doing here. Well, so if you want to know a little bit more about this process, you can check out the whole playlist, which is in the description below of the previous videos that we've got. And also you can support us by going on Patreon and becoming a patron, which the description is again in the information below. And you know, you get access to all the files, and sometimes I do like a little bit of behind the scenes videos or like little explainer videos. And besides St. Mary's Hospital, which is what this hospital is, you can get all the files from all the different YouTube videos that I've done here. And it's also a good way for getting engaged with the community. Cool. Right, so without further ado, let's get started with today's session. And today's session is going to be a little bit different. So we're probably going to be stepping a step back now from Blender, from our design, because we've gotten to a fairly decent level at this stage. And what we want to do now, though, is make sure that this design is fairly pragmatic. So we don't have a brief, we don't have a program, because we don't have like the client on our team, right? This is more like, let's treat it like as a competition in a way, right? And as a competition, even though we don't know the program and whatnot, we still have to have like a strong sense of whether the building works or not. So how do we do that? Well, the easiest way is to sketch. So we're doing a lot of sketching here. But besides that, there's a few things we can also do in Blender. One of the first and quick and easy things to do is to set up a grid and see what kind of grid is starting to make sense with our site over here. Sorry, I'm just gonna adjust my mic a little bit so it's closer to my face. Right? Okay. So that's all set up. Cool. And so once we've got this, now we can really quickly start to create like some of the interiors, right? So first off, I have massing, right? I have setup. Very important to be organized, not terribly, but at least with collections. So I'm going to create a new collection here. And what do we call this? Shell and core. And making sure that now we have some shell and core elements that work. So I'm going to position my cursor somewhere over here. Let's turn on the screencast key so you can actually see what I'm doing. I probably should go a little bit smaller, shouldn't I? And yeah, OBS always gives me this, I don't know, some kind of error where it decides to move me in a place where it's not exactly where I put myself. So I'm just fixing my OBS here. Okay, there it is. I'm small. You can see more of my screen. Good. We see the screenshot. The hotkeys that I'm entering in here as well. So I'm coming off of a 4-hour design studio where I was talking before that. So today is my talking day, basically. By the way, look at these shadows. Isn't that really wonderful, really beautiful? I did this past the previous session. It's done in a very similar way where we were just using a different panel. And again, if you want to go check out, I would definitely suggest like looking at the other sessions if you haven't. Cool. Grid. Shift right click to put our cursor somewhere. Shift A, mesh, Let's go with a circle. Circles are what we always start with when we're creating grids because they're generic, right? They're not as directional, so we don't need to worry about them as much. Now, what size should this be? Usually we do something like half a meter, probably even less, like 0.3, 0.4. That's a good size. Now we need to apply the scale in object space because that doesn't work, right? So it's going to mess up our array. So we're going to be using a lot of arrays in here. So we want to go to object and then apply scale. Okay, so scale is applied. Cool. And once the object is applied and the scale is applied, then we can continue now and add an array. So let's go to the array properties over here. Sorry, I just want to adjust this to make sure I see my quality of the stream. So in case it goes down, I can see it. It's kind of hidden in here, my window. Kind of see it there now. Yeah, it's saying it's kind of okay, but not completely. Let me just make sure everything is okay on my side. Quit a couple of programs, probably always a good thing, right? Not to have everything open. What else can we quit here? Just so we make it a little bit faster for you guys. Okay, let's see how that goes. Sometimes the connection is okay, sometimes it's not. We know how it is, right? So, yeah, it's saying that it's poor. So it would be great to actually get your feedback on this and understand. Yeah, please let me know if there's like some spotting things. Sometimes I can like reconnect and disconnect and it makes it a little bit smoother. So I'm waiting to hear from you guys in the chat. Cool. All right. In the meantime, I'm going to continue. So a column, we've got it over there. Now it's 1-to-1, it's 0.3 and 0.3 meters, which is about the average. So let's add an array modifier and we're going to uncheck relative and check constant. So the spacing that we usually deal with is about 7 to 9 meters. That's the ideal. So let's try something like 7.5 meters for our columns. And then we're going to use our project angle, which is 15.5 degree rotation. So now that should be completely well aligned. And I'm going to go to X-ray mode to make sure that we see everything the way we should be seeing it. Okay, so once we have that all set up, now we can change the array number to more just to put the grid on there. Great. So that's our grid in one direction. So what do? We have to create the grid in the other direction. So let's add an array. Uncheck relative, check constant. And what are we going to do here? So we should, well, it doesn't always need to be the same distance, by the way. Sometimes it can be different, but a good starting point would be to try to keep it the same. So let's create a grid over here. So, okay, that grid is starting to make sense, right? It's not too bad. Always we would need to create like an edge grid, a perimeter grid. But where it's going to start to get tricky for us now is with all the wonderful and interesting setbacks that we have created. Wow, in fact, even this angle here almost works, doesn't it? I guess it's almost a 45-degree angle because that's what it needs to be for this to work well. So if it's not a 45-degree angle, it won't work completely well. Okay, so sorry guys, so YouTube is telling me that it's my reception is a little bit poor, my internet connection. It's an odd time for it to be poor, you know, it's midday over here and there's not a lot going on, so I'm not sure why it's not working to its full capacity. But yeah, it's there might be some buffering issues for which I sincerely apologize. But if it's again too chatty, too what is it called? Too choppy, let me know in the comments. I can try to start and end. Maybe that's what I will do. I will pop. Let's see that. Oh, now it improves somehow magically. Not sure why, but yeah, something happened. Cool. Anyways, so going on. So yeah, that's how we typically align a grid, right? So we have like an orientation in one direction, then we have an orientation in another direction. That's step one. So let's call this grid. How should we call this? Mid building. So one building mid grid. No lag on your end. Thank you, Tobu Brett, for letting me know. Cool. Now let's do the perimeter grid. So I'm going to duplicate this and we'll get rid of one of the arrays. So we'll just have an array in one direction and then R to rotate. And you know, we can put the first one more or less where it needs to be. And then we put a grid along the perimeter. Okay, so that's how we're going to put that there. Now we have a setback here, which I can see. It's a little bit hard to see, but it is there. Like we have a setback on top. Now these kinds of setbacks, like if we put the grid like we have here, a little bit behind the facade, it's fine. However, all this distance here, that's a cantilever, right? And it's okay in some cases. However, that cantilever, it has to be like a very, very small, what's it called? Distance. Usually should be less than 2 meters. If it's more than 2 meters, then we have a problem. So we have to be a bit careful on that. So I'm just saving here the file so we make sure that we've got the right thing. So yeah, we have to check what this distance is here, right? Because that's going to make a big difference to us if that distance is more than it should be, basically. And so that's what I was talking about in the previous session. To make sure that these setbacks really work, we need to rationalize them a little bit. And we can kind of tell. So these grids here that we have in Blender, that's 1 meter grids, right? So if that's 1 meter grid, so we have about 2 meters here. So that's really pushing it. It's possible, it's doable, but it's pushing it. And then we also have to see like where the setback is happening, right? So if so that setback is pretty high. Okay, so sometimes we can have like double columns, so 2 by 2 columns. And yeah, these days, I mean, I've seen structural engineers do all kinds of interesting things. So we could have something that starts, you know, if I'm drawing a section here. So this is a section to the building, and the building is doing something like this at the moment along this facade, right? And, you know, a person is about this size over here. There are possibilities, right, of having a column that's running along the perimeter where it should for most of the distance, and then transferring that column over. It gets more complicated, you know, more difficult. We want to try to avoid this as much as possible. So the simplest thing to do is like we have here the setback, is to reduce the size of the setback and just have columns here. The trouble with the columns there, we have two choices actually, two options in there. One is, first is cantilever. So let's call this option A is cantilever. I guess this is also a design class, not only a Blender class, isn't it? Right, so cantilever is that all these here drop. And then the second thing is that we have an extra level of columns. Right, so whatever the building is doing, we have an element here, and then we've got an extra element over here. Okay, so but that distance then is too close, right? And that obscures a little bit. Like you can imagine then if we have this kind of situation where we have an extra column here and here, you know, where is it? Here and here. Well, maybe in this case it works because it's at least perpendicular, because we have to think about the layout of that space. Like, you know, if you have a corridor, okay, as long as we get through the corridor, that works. But we have to think about the internal layout of the spaces. So what are we going to have here? I mean, in this kind of space, I have to say what the sizes are, but we probably have like some suites. I don't even know if we have like the space for a proper suite, or once we put in the core, which is going to be in the middle, right? We put the core somewhere over here. We have a lift bank on one side, and then we have a lift bank on the other side. So we enter in there. So these are all of our lifts going. We should probably have at least 8, you know, because it's a fairly big building. And remember, like, we actually access all the other wings from there. We're going to need some kind of stair core. And yeah, I mean, these days buildings are like half core, aren't they? Like when they're big, that's essentially what happens, which is not the most fun thing to do, but it is what it is. And we have to understand how to design with that. Sometimes, you know, especially when I do my really lovely and beautiful designs, like the ones here on my website. So, whoops, wrong window. So when we go in there, like these shapes, right? Like they're super beautiful shapes, but well, they're also fairly straightforward and plain. Like there is a core, you can actually see the core and the structure. So they do make sense. I think about that in all projects, by the way, how to do it. But some other ones, they might be a little bit less resolved. Let's see if I can find one, spot one in my own collection here of conceptual models. So there's one here, you know, okay, we got like a core, but we don't have a stair, right? So the stair is going to get quite large, so it might not look as beautiful as what's shown here. This project is a proper project, right? So that's done when I was working as a project architect at HOK. So that is actually completely resolved, facade, interiors, and everything. But, you know, we spent full time, myself and my team, and it varies depending on like which direction we are. We would spend, you know, like a year to like design that. So it's, you know, like good design, and I always say that, and I really mean it. Good design takes time. Otherwise, you know, we're kind of at this like a conceptual level, which is fine for researching ideas, but once we go beyond them, it definitely takes time. I'm trying to find other bad examples here. Yeah, these are more like pavilions and whatnot, so maybe not so much. Oh, I know one. Well, first off, the airport, for sure. Like that airport, you know, like, yeah, it's great, but airports also have like massive infrastructure, right? Like work, especially the flows of the people. We have to make sure like that the flows of the people work in both directions, and that takes time to figure out. So it's not as quickly as a beautiful three-dimensional sketch, even though I'm all about that, right? I do that, as you can see, a lot, and I love it. But at some point, we have to go in there and, yeah, make sure that we've got cores that work. And especially in this case, I want to also address, you know, like looking at a lot of like the naysayers that we've got around. And there are a lot of people, I think, on LinkedIn, when I'm posting things, they're like, no, Blender is not a serious design program. It's as serious as you want it to be or not. You know, you decide how to use it. Yes, sure, it's definitely not built for what we're doing here, right? But that doesn't mean that it can't really be used for that kind of purpose. Cool. So, yeah, a little bit of veering off direction here, but I think it's important to address these kinds of concerns and questions that people may have. In fact, if you guys might have any other questions, definitely let me know in the chat. Happy to answer them. Yeah. Coolio, cool. Going back into here. So yes, we talked about the columns. So let's leave that off for a little bit and let's focus on the elephant in the room, which is the core. So that's a sketch. Let's see now if we can try to make that sketch a little bit more realistic, right? By starting with a trusty old plane. Where are we? So let's click somewhere over here. Add a plane. And the way I like to do cores is by figuring out the lifts, right? Because that's essentially what determines the core. So I like to name this a lift or elevator, depending on which part of the world you live in. I've lived on both sides of the world, so at least the English-speaking sides, not the rest. So I tend to pick and choose which one I like to prefer. And I grew up in a third country, in Bulgaria, so maybe that's allowed me to, if I wanted to, easily kind of adjust my speaking intonation. Rotate, item, rotate. 15.5, let's use our project angle here. Cool. 2 by 2 meters. So hospitals need more generous lifts. The typical lift for residential building is, you know, 1.2 meters by 1 meter, something like that. But for a hospital, I think this is a good size, at least that, right? And just for always, I think it's quite important to put some people in there. So I'm going to get one of our persons and put him on the roof in this case, just to figure it out, right? So if I put him and our lift plane and isolate that, including all the core, and we just, you know, duplicate this in a similar situation like you would have in a lift, you know. So in this kind of lift, it's quite dense, right? But I don't know if you've been to a hospital lift lately. They do tend to be quite densely packed. And of course we got the awkward guy who's just standing the other way. Yeah, I want to be that guy sometimes in the lift, the weird guy. Anyways, so that lift size is pretty good. That's what I'm trying to say. We can fit quite a few people You'll be surprised how many people you can fit in a 2x2. Of course, if you have like a chair, a wheelchair, which is something that happens often, that takes, you know, the space of 4 standing people. So maybe in one direction, we make it a little bit wider. And usually we also figure out the core based on our, we figure out the structure, which we have over here, based on our core size. Yeah. All right, now, what do I want to do here? So I want to work at ground level, but we have a massing. So we need to figure out a way where we have like a nice ground level. So I'm going to exit out of isolation mode. And actually something that I've done for the facade, we have a facade bottom. Let's rename that facade bottom. And duplicate that, because those are only the outlines that we need. And now we can put that somewhere that's not in this massing layer. Let's put it in show and core for now. And turn off the massing. And facade bottom right now is got some mullions. But if we turn that off, you can see that we have a very nice outline of our facade. Whoa, these are quite wide. We might need to adjust this. Let me see if this is the most current thing that we've done here. Yeah, it looks like it. Ah, okay. It's because the bottom facade is set back. That's right. So we actually need another line, the line that's happening on top. And how shall we do this? So this is a curve. So I'm going to keep this curve. This is a contour curve with tissue. Tissue has contour curves, and they're parametric, right? So it's linked to this. So I'm going to duplicate this curve. And if we go to object data properties, and then we go to the tissue contour curves, we can choose where this is taken from. So if I go up a little bit higher, it should hopefully snap to the higher level. What do I need to do here? Okay, maybe something like this. I still haven't gotten worked out the offset values exactly how they work completely, but that seems to work pretty well. So now we have like a plan outline of our building, which is important. We forgot to put a setback on that side of the building. That's okay. I know why, actually. We've got a this nice plaza there with our waterfall. So that's completely fine. But anyway, so we got like 2 levels now, which make it a little bit easier for us to work with. Great. Now let's go back to our lift core, our lovely lift core. So if I click on it, I want to make this in the y direction 2.5 meters. I think that might be a little bit more realistic. In fact, they sometimes could be even bigger, right? Another interesting thing. So wireframes, unfortunately, you know, wireframe colors, we can give them. But we can only do it in this wireframe option. And you see, why did this go white? I'm not sure. Color, single. Okay, because I've given it an object color. We can also give it a random color, which doesn't seem to be very random unless they're all black. So don't know why that didn't work. But yeah, so one thing we can do with the wireframe colors, which it's a little bit difficult to work with wireframes, I must say, in Blender. And they've made like good advances in everything else, but you can't just, you know, go to a collection and give it a color. So everything in that, you can give a color to the collection, but that stays only like that when we're in the actual collection, right? So it's a little bit different than what I was thinking, right? So, yeah. So what can we do? We can do a couple of things here. We can go to the object properties, and somewhere in here, not visibility, not shading. I think it's viewport display. I'm laughing because sometimes I confuse this, like shading, visibility, viewport display. They're all kind of similar. And in here we can give like a specific color, which, let's see, does it work? How did that color work for this? This is a color, but this is not a color. Is this, okay, so I think we can only give it to meshes. Curves, because this is a curve, it doesn't pick up that color, but a mesh does. So if I change the color of this, does it change? Yes, it does. Yeah, strange. Anyways, so now you learned it. We can only give colors to meshes, and these are curve objects. But there's another thing that we can do. we can change the background. Okay, but we can only do that in viewport shading. Maybe this is where it gets a little bit muddy for some people. You're like, I want to just see my objects clearly, and sometimes it's just hard to do that, isn't it? Like here. So in viewport display, in the shaded viewport display, if you click the drop down arrow, eating my words a little bit here, background. So we can give it a special background in the world, and sometimes we can make that a little bit brighter. Yeah, so that becomes a little bit easier to see. I wish we could also give it a gradient, but we cannot. I don't think we can. What else can we do? We can change the value. Yeah, that's about it, really, isn't it? Anyway, so that can help a lot, you know. And if you want to, you know, we can also turn off the grid, so we don't see the grid. So, voila, we have something that's a lot more clear now. Okay, so, okay, we got this lift now. Let's go back to our lifts. Let's add an array. Simple array is fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 lifts? Why not? So we put these lifts here. And I'm not going to do like the complete 3D of it just now. I just want to give it a bit of a definition so we understand what's happening on the inside by first off applying the scale, apply scale, and then going in there and inset to something like 0.08, maybe 0.1. So I want to give a material, right? So we'll give it 2 materials here. And this material here should have a slightly different color. That's only in the viewport, right? So we're just changing things in the viewport. I find like things like simple things like this make it much easier to understand. Now we know how big each lift is. Another thing we can do is give an outline. First off, we have the option to give an outline to everything by going in the viewport displays and selecting wireframe. So that definitely clears things up a bit more as well. But however, sometimes that can get too busy. Okay. So another thing we can do is just give an outline only to the object that's being selected by in the viewport displays in the object data properties show wireframe. So if I turn off the outline here and you see this wireframe and only this wireframe here stays. Of course, these are just lines, so that's okay. You know, they're not doing anything here. So it makes it fairly easy to see. But if we had some other objects, you know, we might not be able to see them completely clearly. Cool. So that's our lifts. We've got 5 lifts. Shifting. And here we've got 5 lifts. Maybe we'll go with 6 lifts. We need a lot of lifts. Really do. I mean, I think I mentioned this in one of my other videos, but like when our children were born, they were like on the 5th floor hospital, big hospital in London, and the floor was what, the 3rd or the 4th floor, so it's walkable distance. Okay, I guess I have to sketch that really quickly. So if we have the footprint of that, you know, this is like where you enter the hospital and you have like a very nice open courtyard. So it's a massive hospital, you know, with wings everywhere on these sides, right? And inside of it, instead of them keeping it, you know, open, and you know, it makes sense to have like a very nice enclosed courtyard for environmental purposes that connects all the wings. So in the middle they have a core, and somewhere over here they've got a core, and they also have, I forget exactly where they were, but some escalators, you know, that get you to only a couple of levels. And that was really infuriating because, you know, if you wanted to go through beyond like one of these levels over here, I figured out eventually where there was like an emergency stair, because these lifts were always busy, always full. You're waiting 15 minutes to go up 3 floors. So, you know, in the end, we went there and went through there because the escalators weren't reaching in there. That's why I'm super conscious. And I've looked at hospitals also professionally in regards to design circulation, and lifts, they tend to be like the biggest bottleneck. Cool. All right. So we've got this now. I think this is enough course. Yeah. So how does it work with lifts? First off, at least the footprint would work, We also need a very generous space between them. What do we have right now? So I'm going to snap these so they're exactly aligned, and then once we move in that direction, we know that we have a very precise number. So that should be at least 3 meters, right? But in our case, it might be a lot of people waiting here, some in wheelchairs, some doctors, some sick children. They want to have a little bit of space, so we should probably go with at least 4 meters in the negative direction. So that's our core. That is at least our core that we need, and we can put that nice and generously happening in the center there. So once we have this kind of core over here, what else do we need? We need a couple of emergency cores, and again, this is not something that you typically look into a lot of detail, but you need to be aware of it, right? Because it takes space, and we need to design our core around it. Not absolutely necessary, but definitely an important thing. So stairs, we're going to have quite a few stairs in here. In fact, I'm just going to duplicate one of these objects over here, and let's rename it F2 to stair core. That's going to be our unit that we're going to be using, in a lot of different options, a lot of different positions. So once we have this stair core here, first let's adjust the size, but let's get rid of this internal bit first. So X and then dissolve faces. No, X, dissolve vertices. There you go. And now, what's the size of a core? So first off, we need to figure out the sizes of the stuff that's going on in there. So I think at this point it might be easier if I have like a dark color for my annotations. So let's go to annotation. So they're very straightforward typically. We've got an area where we go up to a landing, halfway landing, and then we go up again. Usually, especially in a place like this, and London had Grenfell fire, and that changed the regulations. Now we need a bit more stringent. In the US, they're a bit more stringent. You always needed to have like a double lobby situation. In London, yeah, you don't always need that to have, and that has to go in the routes of the fire. Anyways, too specific. Let's keep it simple for now. We just have a simple one over here, and the door has to go in the way of the egress. This is silly things all architects have to know, right? So, if this is in the upper levels, the door goes that way. This is in the outer levels, the door goes that way. And an important thing is that has to have like a fire exit way that goes to outside. In our case, where's the outside? This is the outside. So somehow this needs to come there as quickly as possible. If it doesn't have a door that directly leads to the outside, then it has to have a protected corridor that leads to the outside. So that's going to be a little bit tricky, right? Like, okay, we have to have these protective corridors for people coming from the emergency stairs, and we have to design it in such a way that, we still enter our building comfortably in different parts. So that's the core essentially. And now about width. So that's why I drew this more. It's about width. So this should be about, 1.2 meters I think is a good height. And the width of the stairs really depends on the population. So the larger the population, the more width you need. So more people can get down through it. So we got 1.2 meters here and then 1.2 meters here. Now that landing depth, that needs to be at least that distance. So that needs to be at 1.2 meters as well. So what do we have here? 1.2, 1.2. So that's 2.4. Then we have walls, right, on either side, which are, they can go a bit deeper here because that is part of the core. Like these walls are usually used for two things. One is for structure, and two, to stabilize the overall structure for lateral stability. So that should be at least, we can be very conservative here and let's say 500 mil. That's a lot. Let's say 300 mil. Why is my D button not working? Okay. So then this is 300. And then this is 300. So 1.2, so that's 2.4, so not that much, right? Plus 600, so that's 3 meters. So it needs to be at least 3 meters, okay? I think we can go to 3.5. It's a hospital. You have to have things a little bit more generous in a hospital. What does 3.5 mean? So we have extra 250 mil on either side of here, so that's 1.4 meters. Yeah, that's good. 1.4 meters. So that's in that direction here. And then in this direction here, it gets a little bit over. Yeah. What is the word that I'm looking for? So 170. I don't know what the word. It gets very technical, right? So the minimum stairs in Europe metric is 170 by what is it? No, 180 by 270. Or if you're in the US, it's 711. Some things I really prefer in the US system because they make it like so much easier. Like 711, that's something I know from college and I'll always remember it because it's very straightforward and easy numbers. But because we're doing this project in metric, since it's in London, we're going to use the metric numbers. So 270 by, what does that say? 180. So 270. We have to have maximum of 12 risers, right? So before we have a landing. So, 270. So it's, if we have 12 risers, we have 11 flat steps, right? So those flat steps is 270 by 11. I have to get my calculator out. 270 times 11 is about 3 meters. Okay, that's what we needed to know. So that thickness here is then about 3 meters. And then we've got, what do we say here? 1.2 meters. This, wherever we have the exit, that needs to be a bit more generous. Yeah, so 1.2, so that should be probably like 2.5. Why does it need to be more generous? On the upper floors, that door opens on the inside. Man, this is getting technical. And when people are going down, we don't want those people, if that door opens, if it's over here and it opens, then it's encroaching on the clear space. So that clear space, that has to stay around. And usually, like if you've seen like in buildings, it gets drawn as like a little line and for people to understand exactly what's happening. So I think this is good. 1.2, 3, and 2.5. So what is that? So we've got 2.7 plus 3, and then we have the depth. So it's a big stair, isn't it? It's like 6.3 meters. So 6.3. So that's the sizes we want. So we want something that's 6.3 by 3.5 meters as a good start over here. Yeah. So that's where we're going to make this space over here. Yeah. So again, this session is going to be, as you're noticing, a little bit different, right? Fun in other ways, fun in other architectural ways, but it's part of the process. Hey, and that's what we're showing here. This is part of the process. Let's enjoy it. I need to figure out how to get some music on here as well. I think it's could be good for me and for you as well. So, just listening to my cracky voice the whole time. Dimensions, what do we say? 3.5 by 6.3. So we've got here 3.5 meters, and here we should have 6.3 meters. And that's the size of our core, ladies and gentlemen. That's one core. I'm not going to bother with the inside for now. We're just going to have nice little blocks in there. We just need to position them. In this kind of space, boy, I don't remember the distances, to be honest. What are the distances? I feel embarrassed about that now, but you can see clearly it's been a while since I've looked at codes. We usually have somebody else in the office that does that because I have been the guy busy designing the conceptual architecture, not the course. I don't know if we need one or two. That's what I'm trying to say. But for safe purposes, we're going to say that we have 2 in there. I think it's a hospital building, so we do have to be extra conservative. If somebody's looking at this, either now live or in the comments, definitely let me know. I'll be curious to see. Brush up on my code, on my codes. Okay, so I think this is pretty good, except, I feel like that's a tight spot, right? To only move people from one side here. I would ideally like to have like a double kind of open circulation. And what does that mean? So we should move that core out that way and that core out that way. And you see like just the cores, right? They get massive, and that's covering like a good bit of our floor plate. Besides that, we would need like some extra rooms in there, some extra shafts, especially in a hospital. You're going to need massive shafts to move a lot of the important things, gas, oxygen, I don't know how many different things they have, but they have a lot, right? They usually store it somewhere in a storage, and that storage is typically underground or wherever is safe. Some is on the roof, some is underground. But so yeah, we will need massive shafts. Now those shafts don't need to be here. They're best suited in some corner, unless you know we need something in there. So we might actually have shafts everywhere. Let's put them. We started with this wonderful exercise of putting all the important bits and bobs in here, so we can continue with making it even more accurate. And those shafts, they should have a clear distance, like they should be somewhere in the middle, right? So one there, one somewhere over there. That should be big enough. Usually you might have multiple. So one for, you know, like the typical building systems. So that's electricity and plumbing. Plumbing is quite tricky here as well, and dirty water and clean water and gray water, especially these days. I hope that hospitals are designed in such a way that a lot more of the gray hospital gets recycled. But I'm not sure, right? So 2 cores, just to be safe. Now those cores, again, fun technical stuff, isn't it? So those cores, they have to have the most amount of access. In other words, you know, if you know something from that core needs to go there, that doesn't work, does it? Because the travel, like the distance that we need to span on each floor, doesn't justify. Like it's expensive to route pipes, and if you think about the floors multiplied, it's quite a bit. So in these kinds of situations, you would typically have another core on that side. Whew, there you go. Cool. All right. Now we need some stairs. A stair here and another stair there. Don't know if we need another one. We need a lift also, an emergency lift in case of fire or something else. That can be rotated the other way. Let's start giving these some colors. Let's say this is shaft. Let's call it shaft. What color should the shaft be? Maybe that's, I don't know what. Something reddish. And what I'm going to do now is shift select all of these and select this one last. And we want to link everything to it, right? So the object data, that's essentially like blocks in Blender, right? So Control L and link object data. So now that's all linked, okay? We should do the same with the lifts. So let's select that lift, and this lift, and Control L, link object data. So now that's all linked. So we can call this lifts. Lift walls, and then lifts. Let's give it a bit of a more meaningful color, I suppose. And now we've got our stair cores. And again, I want to link them all. So if we edit one, because we're going to be eventually adding more detail to it. So if we edit one, if we select one of them, and I've shift selected, and this is the last one, Control L, and link object data. And that's really cool in Blender. Like it's something that also, you know, is super useful for architectural design and architecture in general, is, you know, having such easy access to blocks, because that's what they are, essentially blocks or families in Revit. And in here, so what can we do now? Okay, there's one thing we need to fix, which is the scale. So this scale is not one-to-one in object space. And when we do this, when we apply the scale, we get this pop-up, which is new. Create new object data and apply transform. So it's asking to create a unique copy. We don't want to do that. We want to undo the last step. Let's go to here, undo history. And is it here? Link transfer data. Let's make sure that I didn't. So we can go to object data properties here, and in plane we can see exactly how many objects are being shown, like how many users are of the same mesh. Let's call this lift. We can even rename the mesh, and that's separate, right? So you can see here it even shows us what's going on with the geometry. So we have the object data, and then we have this tree of data over here. Cool. So that's already named. That's pretty clear. These are lifts. They're linked because we have 3 users. These are linked. Let's call them shafts. Stair core, shafts. And now let's call these stairs. Stair cores. And you know, they shouldn't be named lifts. But first, so they're not, oh, they are linked already. Oh, well. Well, I'm going to apply the scale to all of them. I've never tried that. So let's see if it will. Amazing. This is new feature, by the way. You wouldn't be able to do that before. So it's, you know, they're linked and we apply the scale, but once we have all of them selected, it fixed them. Learning new things every day. So why is that useful? Now, let's say we want to go in there and insert that 0.3 to represent some kind of interior. So if we put that in there, we got a clear representation of the thickness of the walls, right? And that comes through everywhere. That's why we want to do it. Cool. All right. Moving on. So we got some shafts everywhere. We got some lift cores. So we need an emergency lift here. I don't know if one would suffice or if we have multiple. Now we also have to design these. So I think we can get away with 4 lifts. Of course, we need to figure out like the population. That's typical. But besides the population, what does that mean? So the population covers the width of the cores, the width of the lifts. But besides that, the number of lifts is based on the distance. So we have to look at like the furthest distance. So a distance, you know, from here. So can draw exactly there because I keep snapping on something to there, if that's enough. And, you know, from here, if that's enough. And then, you know, we do have to have like a second means of egress, which for us is going to be, we can move one of those cores over here. So that's where we're going to put that core. So we have, and that one is quite far though, isn't it? And let's think about how these levels are going to work. So we always have something along the perimeter, right? So this is suites, rooms, whatever. This would be a good place for suites. And then we have the corridors in the middle. Here, you know, that's going to be a double loaded corridor. Is that the right way to say it? I forget what these are called. But essentially, you know, we're going to have some program in the middle. It's not going to be a very big program. In fact, you know, it might be better to try to minimize like the core sizes. To just keep it to a single corridor somehow, right? So we need like some corridor in here. And then everything else, you know, we try to make a Sparta loop. So there's just this axis. What does that mean? So maybe, you know, the depth of, you know, these suites here or rooms, that gets a bit more generous. And so let's try this again. So we have this core and we can orient that bridge, right? So that's why we've kept everything parametric up to this point, because once we go through this exercise, a very much necessary exercise to figure out how the building works, we'll put, you know, we know that we need to orient our bridges somewhere over here. This one I think is working fine. And then that also depends on the column sizes. So we need to make sure the columns more or less land like in a nice place where we don't have a column in the middle, right? So once we have that sorted, well, we will sort it later. But if we look at the regular floor, we'll probably have something like this. There we have a corridor, and you know, we don't know what's going on in here. We won't figure that out. Some of these could be rooms. Most likely they're suites, you know, with some like labs or whatnot in the back side, and then you have like patient rooms or doctors' offices that are near the windows. So you usually have like some kind of internal circulation in there as well. It really depends on the unit, you know, some units are designed differently and so on. I guess I know a bit about hospitals, it seems. Okay, and now this space here is very awkward. You know, I don't know what to do with that. Maybe there's, yeah, you could have like some labs or something that's going in there, and then we should have. Well, that's the stair. That's the emergency. But remember, we only need to access like a single door to there. So that's the kind of access that we need. And yeah, we can say I think this is a pretty good suite size for something. In fact, it might be too big. So this is emergency. That's why, you know, I'm making it a little bit less generous. As long as people know how to get to there, that's what's important. And we can definitely eat like a good chunk of that. And that's not very right. I'm just doing like a bad sketch. So it's about over here. Ooh, noticed I need to move myself. So somewhere over here. So we've got like these kinds of corridors. So that's the circulation essentially. Right. So while we're doing this, let's figure out what's going on in this area here. So very similar thing, right? So we got like building, and again, it will be ideal if we have just a single corridor. So we might push these out to have like a single corridor in here, and that corridor is going through as much of the building as possible to somewhere over here. All right, and everywhere around, you know, we either have suites, most likely suites, with some internal circulation, and then we've got the nice like generous axis that we know like which way is the way. So you know, now let's think about like the typical user experience. I'm going to take a screenshot of this. I think this is a nice little sketch here. Just to also show, you know, to you guys and to the wider public, the kinds of like sketching, like it's something as simple as sketching. Our plane is a little bit on the wrong place, right? Including our lift course, and I think it's because of the cursor, which was snapped to at the top of the building, and I don't think there's a way to move annotations. Like they stay where they are. They're not that flexible. If we were doing this with grease nodes, which is maybe something I'll talk about a little bit later, not just right now, then we can move. But you know, I'll keep that where it is for now. Or let's just create a new one and trace. Put our cursor in the right place, so it should snap now to... Oh, it's still not snapping to the bottom. That is interesting. Why in heaven's name isn't that snapping? It's going a bit crazy. Okay, we can override that. So if I go to the 3D cursor, usually it's really good at snapping. Maybe it's because I'm in wire. Ah, okay. We don't have anything to snap to. That's why. So there's a new feature. This is fairly new. Well, I think it's 3 or 4 versions, but I only recently discovered it. If we hold in the cursor and I click and hold, and I hold control. Oh, come on. And I hold control. So first you have to activate it and then hold control. We can actually snap the cursor. So now we know it's exactly on the plane that it should be. Again, that's a fairly new feature, but very handy because it becomes more like a universal snap. Okay, now let's try to redraw everything in a slightly different layer. I'm going to make this one slightly gray. So let's create a new one. Make it black. Saturation. Value. So then we have something that's a little bit more easy to understand. Let's go to this property over here, the annotation tool. And yeah, so what do we have? We got something like this we said. We got a corridor that's doing something like that. And I think it will be much more efficient to have a corridor going that way. And then another one. So we've got something like that here. Yeah. And we can erase. Whoops, that was a big eraser. Let's redraw that now. Should be fairly clear to where, you know, like if people need to use an emergency access, where they should go. That's why I'm trying to make it like land at that point over there. Okay, that's pretty good. So yeah, these are the suites, you know, this could be like separated, maybe like that. You have like a small suite here, another suite there, or like a super suite. Or in some cases, like the whole floor is a suite, right? So then, you know, we would definitely have like a corridor loop around with like maybe in like a nurse's station that happens in the middle or something of that sort. So in that case, you know, we can say that this whole thing is a suite here. And then on that side, you know, we have our nice bridges. Should be pretty wide. And then the circulation that's happening on both sides. So somewhere over here and somewhere over there. So we've got this going on. So that's it. So I can turn off that layer and hopefully now this is... What? How did that happen? I really wanted to draw this on the right place. I must have done undo or something at some point. Gosh. Let's try this again. Ay, ay, ay. Or am I snapping to something? Let's see. So there's options for the 3D cursor. That's where it is. So it's view. Instead of view, it should be... oh no, that's the gizmo. The annotate tool. Yeah, it is on the 3D cursor. Let's redo this really quickly now. Gosh, third time. Third time is a charm though. Usually I have to redo projects, massings at least 3 times to get it right. That's always the case. No matter what I do, that seems to always be the case. Okay, so let's keep drawing here and here. That, we can say that's about it. Oh, I forgot to create a new layer. So let's create a new layer. Life is very different, isn't it? Like you get to see like it's almost like behind the scenes. So you get to see not only the beautiful, but the ugly as well. Not the ugly, but like the more challenging aspects of it. You know, like what, like the thinking process. And that's what I want to show you these live series is like the thinking process behind many of the decisions that we see. Please be on the ground floor. Thank you. Now let's grab all of the stuff that's over here at least. Wow. Everything is in like its own little world. This is, I don't know if you see like, you open an AutoCAD floor plan at some point, you know, and you think everything is flat, and then you go just in there for the fun of it, in a 3D view, and you're like, oh my God, why are there so many levels to those? This is what this feels like here. So we can click on this property here, press 0, and if I hold out while pressing enter, that should apply the property to all of them. Yeah, so Blender has this weird thing where the properties, they only apply, and this is at 0. How in the world? Okay, it's not active. So they only apply to the single selected object. You saw that, right? So when I selected just that object, it landed at its own little location here. Great. So at least we got a floor. Why did I want a floor? So we can align things a little bit better, understand things a little bit better, especially how to orient the core. That's what these sketches felt like they were helping. So the cores are going to be oriented very much along these edges. It seems like that's the area that helps the most because that's the longest area in the project. So if we have a corridor, you can imagine how it would make sense. Cool. So next steps. First off, do these fire cores make sense? Yep. They do. You know, if you think now about coming in from different positions, you know, from different places in the hospital, you know, if you're, I mean, it gets a little bit tricky from there. I'm not sure about this guy, you know, but we definitely don't want to live in burning. So, you know, he has to have a door in there somewhere. And this part, like exactly this part, this is important because it's huge, and I've seen it firsthand of what it takes to make this work. It's a lot of work. It is so much work to make that work, and it's exactly this. You know, you have suites, fire riggers, fire doors. Do they have enough fireplaces? I'm not going to worry about it more than what we're showing here, but we want to get the basics of it. So one thing that can definitely help is having one of these fire cores over here, the stair core. So in this case, you know, the people that come from this side, you know, they're kind of close, right? So, you know, they can use that, and then the people that come from that side, they can also use that. So it's not only for the people in this building, but also for those people in that building. Okay, well, yeah. Other challenges, I won't get into it because you can spend all my time, all of our time, all of your time talking about that. Want to get the basics. Okay, so now we got something working here, more or less. Let's go back to our ground floor and thinking about how we move through the space. First off, I believe it might be best to position that in here. Okay, we got a core. Now we have a very awkward situation though, right? Like, that space is not really usable. In fact, the ground floor, you know, that's always coming to the edge, you know. So can we first off arrange this in a way where it makes more sense? And then let's really think about the front entrance. As mentioned, there's a building which I don't know if it's... Let me check really quickly. Where are we? Come on, this is... maximizing in a different window. I think I should talk about this at some point because this is fairly interesting, and it's a tube station in London. That's the interior of it. or any of these other ones. Yeah, you guys can let me know. But what did I want to check? Let's check on Paddington Hospital. Not Paddington. St. Mary's Hospital. St. Mary's Hospital. New building. Construction progress. I don't know if they started the work or not. Redevelopment update. For... So this is from last year. So that's talking about like the hospitals. That's the trust, right? So this is our, I think this is our trust. So in London, in the UK, the hospitals, they're all public body. They're organized by public bodies. But each hospital, not each hospital, but there are different trusts, which are their own corporations, their own organizations that look after, you know, their 1 or 2 or 3 hospitals and a university and any other assets. So, wow. So that new hospital is gonna... Yeah, they're not cheap buildings, are they? I think nothing that's being built these days is cheap. That is... What is that? Essential Health opens... I don't know what this is. Well, it says it's somewhere near us. Where is that? I don't know. I'll have to investigate that. But this is something that's different. Anyway, so St. Mary's Hospital. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of information, which means they haven't started it. Right? If we can't find like some construction images, we won't find it. And that's what's happening. That I was essentially looking for this building over here, which is next door to us. So and you can already see in here they're highlighting a building, right? So that's exactly our site with a very generous bridge to go through them. So why did I show that? So if you go back to our massing, you know, if we have this building happening somewhere over here, so this is the footprint of that building. And then we have everything else with the hospital. I think for the time being, this building will stay, although probably when, you know, whatever we do in our site gets built, this will probably get demolished and they'll build something nicer on there. That's usually how it works. Because, you know, this is not historic. It has 0 historic relevance. Very ugly building. And so they'll get rid of it. And then here they have some more historic. I don't know if any of it's protected. So you have like the Victorian fabric, the Victorian structure, which is pretty intense. It's like these tiny little mazes in it, you know, with very old and creaky corridors to, yeah, it's fun times. Anyway, so we have a bulk of the project. By the way, this is, you know, the private, I forget the name of it, but this is the private birth wing. So this is where the Prince George and, you know, I forgot all the names of the princes, they're all born here. So this is royal family uses that. I thought my kids were going to be born here because that's our local hospital, but in the end it's not on this map, but they're like, oh yeah, my wife felt more comfortable in a different hospital. And also here I was initially thinking, you know, to put the entrance somewhere over there in that corner, so that's the closest site to reach to us. But now that building, you know, it's more modern, it's more efficient, and usually when you have new modern buildings, they take up a lot of the program in there. So when we do that, then we might want to move this like somewhere else. So maybe that's the entrance over here. So that's what we do. Cool. And so from that point, that's what we're going to do, right? So we're going to put the entrance somewhere over here. So you know you need to walk through there, and you know you need to walk through there. You come in there, and then from that point, there has to be a very clear understanding of how you get to the actual core and the ground level. So we usually do that by shaping up that core a little bit more. I mean, it should be still a bit more generous, right? So not too constrained. When you enter, you should have a fair bit of space because, again, there's a lot of people moving with wheelchairs and all kinds of different aspects. And I think it would be really nice to be able to view our waterfall. Remember, we have a waterfall over here. Wow, Stefan, thank you so much for the super sticker. Appreciate that. And so how do we do that then? Maybe we try to rotate everything the other way. right? So what if we grab all of our cores, all of these things, except the stairs? The stairs need to stay more or less where they are, but we can grab, so let's start first simple. So let's start just with these. What if they're rotated the other way? They make the building less efficient. Why do they do that? Because when we have a core like that, you have to think about the space that we occupy on either side, right? So we have a space on this side, and we have a space on this side, which needs to be a corridor. So if we push the corridor so much, this is the edge of the building's outside, maybe it's okay. You know, maybe it's not the worst thing. We have a lot of, well, no, we cannot do that. Yeah, we definitely cannot do that. Okay, we have to do it a different way then. Why can we not do that? Because we want to have, if you come out of the lift, imagine now. So we're coming in the building and we have this kind of orientation. And let's erase some things here. Okay, so let's try this again. This is the main entrance. First off, that's way too close. You know, you don't want to go directly to the lift. We want to have a much more generous buffer area. Second off, you imagine, you know, okay, let's just sort it out, see how it works. We come into here, we go into a lift, right? We come into there, we go up, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We come out, and then we need to go over here. So to do that, then it gets very complicated if you're a new patient, if you're a new person that's visiting this. You have to go around, you have to go this way, and then you have to go. Doesn't work. Does not work. So let's rotate these back to where they were. So rotate -90. And put them back somewhere over here. Okay? So we've got this. So this is definitely the right, because now, okay, with this kind of orientation, we probably need the entrance to be in this corner. I think that might work better, reception. Just because we should have a bit more buffer area, and it should be a bit more clearly organized towards where you go to the circulation. That's not always the case. You know, there's a lot of hospitals where the lifts are in like really strange positions, but I don't like that. I want it to be as simple and straightforward as possible, because that would make for a better experience for everybody. So now let's imagine, maybe we step this back. This is the hospital entrance. This corner, maybe it goes, you know, on that side as well. So the people from there, yeah, okay, they have to walk a little bit more, but I think that might be fine. Or we just say, okay, you know, that space is quite generous. Maybe it's occupying like this whole area over here. So we have some extra doors. This is the ground floor, remember? So we have some extra doors there for them to get through. So we come in there, we come through here. We have reception area, a bit of a buffer zone, just so, you know, you have a lot of movement through the circulation. Then we go through the lifts. We come in the lift. We go in the lift to the ground. We're in the ground. Now we're traveling, going up to our level. We come out, and then, whoops, from that point, it's much easier, right? You come in here and you know, okay, you know, I see it, right? There's a bridge that way, and there's a bridge that way. So you know much better. It's much clearer where to go. Cool. Fine. So, if we've got these kinds of situations here where the lifts, the lobby is in the corner, because initially I was thinking what we can do is to make this a very nice experience is split the cores. So we have a bit of a gap in between them to see the lift. And maybe we still do that. Maybe we still try it, but we just say that maybe the entrance is somewhere over here, right? But we can see through it. I think that would be a really nice experience to be able to see that, to be aware of that. Yeah, I want to do it. You know why? Because it's also important for the other lifts to have that constant perception. Although that's not going to work though, is it? Because, or it might work in a different way now that I'm thinking of it. So let's think about the circulation in these upper buildings. So the most basic circulation would be, right? This is all wrapped up. You know, that's some kind of core. So we've got a corridor that's doing this, right? So the corridor is coming through there. We have here everything in these areas. That's the occupied space. This is a very tight corner, very awkward corner. So you might need to lift everything up, but the situation will be exactly the same. that's the most efficient circulation, right? So you come into this area, you go around in here, and then, you have either like this whole thing is a suite of some sort, or you have like rooms that are aligned into this edge over there. Now though, how would that work if we have a slightly different orientation? So if we create a gap for ourselves by pushing these edges out, right? So this gets all the way bigger, and we try to keep a very clean line of sight. So we experience that beautiful moment also from our circulation, from the moment you come out of the lift. So though not always, right? You can come out of here in different directions and not like really experience it. But it's a nice feature. We should make the most of it, because it doesn't happen often. So yeah, let's try to maximize that by having this kind of core. Maybe you can have like a little balcony or something in here to be able to see that. So yeah, let's do this, and then this is a suite, right? And then this is a suite. You might have an internal corridor in here somehow. So that's how it's going to work. So I think that's going to be an even more aspiring and more unique design, right? Cool. So boy, oh boy, oh boy, this is really the architectural process full on, isn't it? Right. So we've got this here and we've got this here. So once we do that, let's go ahead and now modify things. Now I'm going to take screenshots as well, again, because I think it's important to show that kind of progress. By the way, I use a program called Share X on Windows, which is the best for screenshots. So we got our corridors there, we got this. Cool. So let's start to build some of that up. Now I really wish I built a different... Well, I have that, but that's somewhere in the air. Oh, is it? Okay, we have both. So I'm going to go to this layer here and just erase the bits on the top up high. So this is a clear layer, and this is our more sketchy layer. In fact, let's give it a different color so we understand that. Sketches in Blender. Just, I think maybe even like if people don't take Blender seriously for anything else, even though as you can see in this process it's super serious, but just being able to sketch in the same environment where we can position like very basic boxes, that's already like a huge step up beyond, sketches on paper or printing out things or even in Photoshop, right? So a lot of potential there for really interesting things happening. Cool. And now, I do wish there was a bit more. Oh, there is. Look at that. I didn't know there's a opacity, and we can change the thickness as well. I knew that, so that's kind of fixed with the thickness. So let's continue now and start moving some of these cores. So how are we going to do that? So first, let's change that array to 3. So we got 3 over here, and we also have 3 over here. Move these, Shift D to duplicate. First I'm going to snap them onto here with holding Control, and now I'm going to move them. What do we want to move? 3 meters. It's going to be it has to be, right, so that's going to be a bit tricky. So we might actually need to, on the ground floor, on the ground floor, we might need the core to be all of this. Right, because this space, this gap won't be enough for people to circulate through. They're going to need to circulate through there, but also through there. Because you can imagine, if there's a person with a wheelchair there and a person with a wheelchair there, and then a few more that are coming and they're all standing. Yeah, we definitely need a bit of extra room in there. I think that's important. 3 meters though, you might also think that that's very generous, but that would help a lot with our views in there. We're just taking away like a very prime area from the hospital, but in this case, it's not really only about efficiency, is it? It's also about creating like the best possible hospital experience that we can imagine. Okay, so we got shafts, we got our lifts here, we have our stair core. I'm keeping the stair cores on this side of the building just so we have a nicer experience on the from the entrance areas. However, so let's try it now to move them. First, I'm going to snap them so they're much nicely aligned in the right place. Let's snap this shaft, whatever it's doing there. We can rotate that. I don't even know if it has to be that big of a size. Now I want to snap these, not snap, but lock these curves so we don't accidentally select them, and we should do the same to the context. So that's locked, so we can't move it. All right. So now I should be able just to select this and move it with the odd person here and there. We can even lock our people, I suppose. Let's turn the capabilities of moving the people around. And now let's think about where's the best place to position this core. Now take into account that line, the internal line, that's the footprint, the setback of our ground floor. Over here. So we really want to position that somewhere in the middle. It's a tough one. And also, you know, have some area that's usable here. Like we want that depth from the edge of this core and here to be usable. And that's quite tricky. Now there are other ways to think about the cores as well. We have it will stick out a little bit more on this side, but that could actually prove useful because then, you know, what can we do here? We can put another lift. In case we don't have enough lifts, we can always put another one, right? So maybe that, I think that gives us a little bit more, and it's occupying that base like area that's not very useful. Now I want to check this distance here because it's very important to have the generous area. So 15.5. And just scale that up. So that's the easiest way to check distances. There is the annotate tool, which, by the way, no, the measure tool. Oh, it says it over here. Let's see. Drag left mouse, drag lure, X to remove an X. Okay, so I have to press X. Let's try it now. I've always been afraid to use that because the measurements haven't been that equal. So 4.5 meters. Yeah, that's not enough space for anything. So we're back to idea number 1, which is to put the entry area over here because this is the area that makes the most sense with our shape that we have at the moment over here. It's a backwards and forwards process, and that's completely natural of trying to sort these out. Now, just looking at these edges over here and seeing like what is the best place to position them where we're taking away the least amount of area. And also, we do have to consider like this back area over here because on the upper floors, that is going to be suites, right? So we should have enough space to position those suites in there. So maybe that core can go in there. I think that's an easy fix, right? So it makes it a little bit more generous. But that, let's say that this is a fairly good alignment. You know, we have a more generous area here, right? So same on this side. We have a little bit more generous area there. We still have like this nice corridor, and these are suites. So we have like a nice suite happening over here. Now we have to, and we're going to do that, right? So we're going to realign our corridors here so they're better aligned to our cores. So maybe that corridor, this gets pushed this way and that gets pushed that way. And that's why the plans are so important, even in completely, what is this called? Completely conceptual area, right? So in this concept, highly conceptual, highly aspirational, do you notice how just having a little bit of this understanding and capability of showing where the right cores are, how it's located, thinking about the entrance sequence, helps us design a better concept. All right. So this is working pretty well. We're saying that this is here. So yeah, that's fixed. That's more or less fixed. So once this is fixed, now we can go back and think a little bit more about our columns. So I'm going to turn off a bunch of layers here. Bunch of sketch layers, so they have their own like annotation. We can even name them to make it like more neat. And in fact, you know, like I think because we're using annotations so heavily, we can drag this so it's higher up on top, so we see it a little bit better. Cool. So now that we've got this sorted out over here, let's grab the grid and see if there is a possibility for it to make sense. Now we also have the setback that I did in the front. I'm not sure whether we'll keep that. Maybe we do have something that's quite subtle. First off, let's snap this to this corner. Over there. Okay. And now, so how do we typically work with this now? So we say we're going to move this. So 1.5 meters is usually the maximum you want to be cantilevering, right? And then we move that somewhere over here along the edge. And then we have 1.5 meters as well. This edge, this sharp edge, you know, in reality, and I think I talked about that before. I need a new sketch layer. Let's create a new one. That'll probably be something like that, right? So because, you know, that's not a useful space. It's very hard to make it nice and sharp, and it can become a little bit of a distraction as well. And also, you know, plan-wise and otherwise, when you have like really sharp corners, there's something subconscious that tells us this is danger. This is something from feng shui a little bit, or feng shui. If you don't know too much about it, that's how you'd probably pronounce it. But feng shui, I don't know too much about it, but what I do know, it's all about, you know, the instinctual protection. And the instinctual is the animalistic protection that we all have. So having a sharp edge like that, and if you're standing somewhere over here, it's automatically warns you that this is, you know, some kind of danger, and you should avoid that. So yeah, we can get rid of that. Okay, so, and yeah, that column actually lands pretty well if we have this kind of corner setback, doesn't it? So that's one thing. Now let's think about the other columns. So that should be more or less aligned with this edge over here. And yeah, have like a 1.5 meter setback. What is the angle of this? I'm curious. So 68.455. I'm just thinking we can probably make this a little bit nicer. So let's try 70. Or it should go the other way. So then 68 meters, 68 degrees. Okay, so that's working pretty well. So that's more or less the grid, isn't it? And on the ground floor, so this is the setback. And it's perfectly fine for the columns to land outside of the setback. In fact, over here, we can make this a lot more generous, right? So we take back all that corner. This is all open on the ground floor. So the ground floor, so that's the lobby area. This is the area that it's covering. At least this building, right? So then this becomes a much more clearly understood entrance, and then the secondary entrance is somewhere over here. So then that's a suite. Again, it would be really nice to have that view towards the waterfall. However, in this case, you know, we have very limited area, and it's always good to have some kind of shop, some kind of restaurant, you know, some kind of, yeah, all kinds of, definitely like, what do you have? So you have a pharmacy, a few pharmacies, right? You have fast food, so, you know, Pret and things like that. Although, you know, over here, there's actually a lot. So that's an M&S, Marks and Spencer. So that's like a food shop in there. I forget where the Pret is. There's a sit-down restaurant somewhere over here. Actually, there's a Pret over here. There's a lot of food here, but that's quite far. You know, if you're in a hospital, you don't want to go too far. There's a Tesco's somewhere over there. So you can definitely benefit with some more on-site facilities. And then there is a lot of it, but it's quite far. It's not even on this map. It's somewhere over here. So there are some things. So yes, generally they are, but we can have a lot more that's somewhere over here in our site, right? Right. So yeah. So continuing with that. So that's what this area is going to be. So we want to keep it closed. The end of the story is the bottom of the story is that we want to keep it fairly closed. We could at least, cut back some of this space over here. So, when you look at that, you're still aware, if you're standing there and you're looking in that direction, you're still aware of like the water. And I think that's the most important thing, is like giving people, all people, no matter where they come from this building, a very strong awareness of the water. Now we can close this at this level because that retail space is important. Ground floor space is always at a premium, right? So, and this is closed as well. So we enter into here, this is the lift lobby. This is the public facing area. Maybe it's something like this, right? So very generous, but you can enter either through this way or through that way. And then the rest we can give back to retail, to pharmacies, to pret-a-mangeres, to sushi places, and all the typical things you have around hospitals. Some people, patients, sometimes they do spend a lot of time in there, so you want to have that access. Usually it's not on hospital premises, although I'm sure that even maybe modern hospitals think about that because it is so necessary and typically always gets filled up. So that corner be best for it to be something like that. We align this with somewhere over here. Great. So our overall public ground floor is this. This is the lobby area, and then we have the lifts. And now we have the stairs, and with the stairs, we need to come out. So that's fairly easy in this case. There's a door there and another one over there. Yeah, so that works excellently. And because this is retail, that gets subdivided quite easily into all these kind of different areas. For this, it's an edge, so you can come out on that side, and here you can come out on that side. So it's all working fairly well. Cool. Let's take another screenshot. Always a good idea. Even for myself to remember like some of these spaces and where they're happening. Okay, so at the level, so we have it more or less figured out. So now we just need to work a little bit more with the column grid and figure it out. So there's the column. It's getting a little bit difficult to see though, right? So then we have this colonnade here. Now we need to figure out where do we stop. And so for the stops, we can do a trick. And it's the same trick that we've done before. So we can use these areas here, the Boolean bits, to exit out. So let's add a Boolean. Add Boolean. We'll use a collection. And we'll use that specific collection and only the big one. So maybe we can go, so let's just make sure we understand how our Booleans are organized. So we have Booleans, everything. Then we have the ones that are used. Then we have the bridges, which are kind of separate Booleans as well, right? And Booleans, right? So those are the shapes that we subtract, basically. So what we need is in here. And we've got a couple of setbacks. So we have the building corridors and ground, and then setbacks. So the setbacks is everything that's happening above ground, and then the building corridors, if we turn this on, now that turned everything on, so let's turn that back off, is these, right? So that's the bits here. And so what we can subtract some of those shapes from there, right? And remember, we're going to modify a little bit of these shapes, which is where it gets super exciting, right? Being able to do this level, we already have like that initial massing, right? So we've got this massing, and we're going to move the bridges, and the whole thing is going to adjust, which to me is like the absolute magic. I love seeing that, right? It's like being able to, let's do it over here. I just have to hide a layer that I know is visible. So collections, let's turn off Booleans. local collections. That's what I wanted. There, and let's turn them back on here. There you go. So one I can see, the other one I cannot. Yeah, so we can control. We have like per view visibility of what we see and what we don't see, which is can be very useful, as you see now. But I just love how easy it is to modify, because I know how much of a struggle it could be. Like if you go back to a plan and you realize, oh no, first off, you know, that angle, let's get it to a nice angle now that works a little bit better with what we've got. So minus 22 degrees. Boom. First change. Second change. We go and we adjust our Boolean bridges. So we go in there, and that's the bit that I was talking about that we need to see, right? And realign. So if we go to wireframe selection, so that bridge needs to move. So check it out. This bridge, well, bridges are these bridges over here. So we're going to start moving them. The facade won't update itself automatically. We need to do that a little bit later. Well, actually, you know what? Now that we move things around, that bridge exactly where it is makes sense, doesn't it? I'm just curious about the width. It's 6 meters. And you can see 6 meters is quite a bit, isn't it? Probably it's too much. Except for firegris, which I'm not sure about. But we can go to 5 meters for now. And adjust that 5 meters. And now I'm going to go to the other bridge here. And let's do the same. So we're going to say 5 meters here as well. But that bridge, so this second bridge, which is over here, we can definitely adjust that one, right? So I can move this. Some over there. And everything adjusts except, yeah, we have to click refresh on the facade because of the way that I did it. To something like that. And is that where we want to exit? Yep, more or less in the center of the building. And here, okay, so I think I rotated that. Yes, I remember why, because we have that fire stair, right? So yes, it is best to slightly rotate. Yeah. So let's keep this open actually. Go back to this bridge. Let's use a nice angle. So do we want to make it exactly 90 degrees to what we have? Why not? 90 plus 15.5. Nope. 90 minus 15.5. Yep. Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? We exit somewhere over here, and we're more or less in the middle of the building. Okay, great. Now this bridge over here. Does that want to be slightly perpendicular to that edge? First off, let's align the edge, right? So let's align the shape here to a nicer angle. So let's use 33 degrees. I think that one can slightly, well, now we also have to think about the suites. Like, so I'm tempted to rotate it more. So 30 degrees, the other way. So more like 38 degrees, like that. So I want it to be even more than angle. Why? Because from that angle over here, then, you know, more people are going to start to perceive it. But there are other ways to do it, aren't there? We can cut that back at the ground level, that corner. And that's going to give us enough of an understanding of that space, you know, so you can perceive it from much further than it would be from whatever angle we do here, unless we go like really crazy and we go all the way through. But then, you know, we lose all the capabilities of the interior space. So I think the position works well. The spacing works well. I say we leave it as is for now. And now let's adjust the bridge. Where's the bridge? Okay, so let me update the facade here. So we have to go to tissue and refresh. That should update itself. Refresh. It's not very happy with that. Let's see what's going on here. I think that might be, oh, I can't select it. That's why. Okay, let's try again. So with this facade, now refresh. There you go. Now, boom, it's in the right place. So the bridges are a little bit easier to see. That's what I wanted to do, like make sure that the bridges are a little bit easier to see. And now we can see how we align this a bit better. So 5 meters, again, that's a pretty good distance. We come out of here, you know, if you're on the upper level, you see everything pretty well. And that's what we want, right? So, you know, you can imagine you're there and you're there, right? So you move through the space in a pretty easy way. Whoa, cool. So that base massing is done. So this base, we're ready to move on to like the next points to modify this. And you know, I have a lot of like interesting ideas actually about this space, about the floor plates. And we are a little bit free, and we should use that freedom to our best advantage, which means that we don't really need to abide by all the rules, the laws that we usually typically have to, by having, you know, some kind of fairly normal facade, right? We can go with something that's, let's say, a little bit more organic. As an example, you know, like similar to like some of the examples that I was showing on my site on uhstudio.com. So let me bring those back up here again so you can check them out. So let's go to uhstudio.com, concept architecture. Yeah, probably not so much because it's not a freestanding tower. But maybe, you know, that doesn't quite make sense either. Some of this can start to make sense. You know, do we have like these layers that kind of peel themselves on and off in different ways? Yeah, some of these details here also start to make sense with like this kind of volume that we've got going on. Love this, by the way. This is a course. You can buy this on Futurely. In case you don't know, you can go to Academy, and that's where all the courses do. I am almost done, nearly done. So I'm only mentioning this to you guys, but this is the new Academy, right? And there's going to be a discount when it's completely, there's a soft launch. You can go ahead and buy it. All the experiences work and everything. There's just a couple of little tweaks that I need to do in terms of like the user experience, email lists and so on. But here you can find all my courses for all the different kinds of elements. I've also added like a map where you can understand, you know, which course might be useful for you depending on exactly what you're looking for from like one page. So then you can go back and say, okay, I need this course or this course. And that's going to grow a lot, you know, so I have a couple of upcoming courses that I'm thinking of, and also, you know, some additional courses on different platforms. This one I'm going to host also here, so you'll be able to experience it with like the same seamless experience that you do with all the other courses. So stay tuned for that. And this course is on Futurely, so very cool one if you're learning about, you know, subdivision modeling. This one, you know, also it also depends on what kind of shape and things. Anyways, what did I want to talk about? Right, so different ways where we can address the footprint. So not the footprint, the facade, but that's going to be for our next session. Maybe in like 2 sessions time, we should have more time to talk about the facade. So what time is it now? So we can go a little bit more to really lock this in, right? So to make sure that this is working exactly like we want. So we got the base there, basically. Now, by the way, really cool thing with this setup, and I'm just thinking now out loud, like these, and that could be set up with, this is with the contour curves, but we can also get these outlines from geometry nodes. So we don't have to hit refresh. It's completely there. And with those outlines, this is going to become like our proper plan. Something I'm thinking out loud now, right? Because I'm doing this in such a manner, like a very architectural manner. Didn't quite update. Let's see what's going on here. So shell and core. Let's try this again. Let's click on this. We cannot select them again. So let's select both of these, and I'm going to hit refresh. And you see like that updates. Now imagine if that's a thick line. We could already do a thick line, right? To have like a proper floor plan understanding of what this space is. And by the way, this outdoor space, I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm really looking forward to design it as well once we get some of these basics out of the way. I am missing a grid. Why am I missing a grid? Oh, because I added a boolean? Yeah. We'll ignore the boolean for now. And let's go in here and select what do we want to select? We're going to select these elements here. And yeah, okay. So that grid, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that works well. Let's duplicate this grid now here. So we have something along on the other side. Now the middle, you know, this is a, okay. We have to think about doing this in a different way also. Now, because we have this kind of short span generally, you know, this core, like the structure around that core, is going to be enough to support a lot of our building. So we don't need columns anywhere close to it. So from that core on, you know, we probably only need a column here, a column there, column here, a column there, column there, column there, column there, a column there. And now in here, we might need, as you see, as like this is showing us, a second row of columns. So again, we want to also align these columns as well as possible to the bridge. So we might need to move that bridge a little bit backwards or forwards just to make sure that it works the best with that, right? So we're going to have a column here and a column there and a column there. And we're definitely going to have some central columns in here. So we're going to break down a little bit of that central space, but it's a lobby. It's fine. It's a reception area. So it doesn't need to be completely super seamlessly nice. And so column there. Now, whenever we do these columns, we just have to also make sure that they work more or less with what we're going to have on top as well. Over here, okay, that distance. Let's check what it is now. Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's a clear span. We don't need any extra columns here. So we just have the edge columns and that. So let's continue then with our columns in the other directions, in the other positions. Got a column there, column here. Again, this is going to get cut back to something like somewhere over there. We have a column there, column here, somewhere over here, there. We're going to need the middle column for sure in this space over there. And I just want to check what this span is. 8.9. So that's pushing it, right? That's a pretty close maximum. But at the same time, you know, it doesn't make sense to put a column in the middle. Like spatially, it doesn't make sense. So we're going to keep only a column in there. And the other columns, we're going to position maybe one there. Yeah, it gets tricky, but that's going to work. So yeah, this space is pretty self-understanding, right? So we have columns just around the perimeter and 1 or 2 columns here in the middle. 1 or 2 there, and maybe 1 column here in the middle. Very awkward, right? Very awkward. You know, imagine like having a space, but you know that because it is a suite, that can be integrated into walls and things like that into it, and no other columns. So we can get rid of that core in there. Okay, let's carry on then. Let's think about these cores now here. Now that is going to get aligned. This is the best edge for the majority of the core to be aligned to, just because it's the biggest span. And we're going to do the same thing that we did before. So we're going to align to that external edge, and we're going to move it 1.5 meters back. And that's going to help us with some of our, did that move? 1.5, nope, 1.5 meters. That's, it's going to help us with some of our setbacks on top. Bottom setback, we don't care because that's the ground level, so it can be its own little thing and the columns reach back. But on the upper, we have to think about the columns. Right, so, you know, for example, this line was an upper line. Okay, what happens there? Like, how do we connect it? We would need to have beams that go from this facade through the facade into there. And that looks, you know, a bit, how shall we say, neo-Gothic? That's a good way to describe it. Ugly, unresolved, other words. Less nice words to use about that. Let's do the same from this edge here, although that edge is going to get aligned to this here, right? So we're not going to have these grids here. So the grid is going to work in the following way. We should just sketch it. with the sketch tool, of course. So we got a grid line here. Then we have the next grid line there. Okay, that's fine. Then what's going on there? Then we've got, is that a grid line? I don't know. Or maybe that's where it gets a little bit awkward and it starts to do its own thing. Usually in structure, I'm not a complete expert, but you know, there's some pragmatic things. You try to separate things into zones, right? So if that zone is doing, you know, this thing, then okay, maybe this zone here in there is a different grid alignment, right? Which is a more rectilinear grid that's aligned to this area. Here we have a core, so we don't need to worry too much about the core. And you know, here between the core and the rest, you know, we put our columns along the edge. So you know, column there, a column somewhere over here. Yeah, corners, they can always be a bit tricky, you know, because we're going to cut them back also, right? So we've got, okay, let's try this again. Column here, column here, column here, column there, column there, there, and probably one over here. So that's it, right? So that's our grid. So we have these column lines here, which are, you know, that's a two-way grid. Well, actually, maybe, because this is the biggest, that can go all the way through. Because it's aligning fairly okay. Not ideal. You know, this here is a bit awkward, right? Because we might need a spacing there. But we can also adjust the spacing. Wow, that can work pretty well for us. We can adjust the spacing and then put these other columns in there. Again, we don't need to resolve the columns completely. We just want to make sure that whatever setbacks we're showing on the higher levels, they make sense with our column spacing. And trust me, this is a lot further that I have taken a lot of conceptual projects like this. But I really want to get into it. Like we have a chance, an opportunity here together to understand this into a different level, right? Of having that experience. So we figure this side out, and this is going to be something fairly similar. So we have like a column grid across this line here. Then I'm just looking at the spacing. So we probably end up somewhere over there. Then, you know, from there, we might continue, and then we just have a couple of extra columns. Somewhere here, somewhere there, and then we have, you know, this core here works as a structural member as well. Maybe only two, actually, that I'm looking at it. So column here and a column there. And structure is sorted. We always need columns in the corners though, no matter what our structure is doing. So we only have a column here. And that distance span is also different. So, you know, in reality, that's how it's going to work here. Might need an extra column here in the facade. I'm not going to resolve that now though. I keep saying that and I keep resolving it more. So that corner is going to need a column and that corner is going to need a column. All right, so that's working pretty well for us. So we've got a grid. We definitely got a grid now. In both directions, I'm going to hide the people because I want to take a screenshot of this because it's starting to make sense. You know, even though it's not completely resolved, it is certainly becoming a lot more resolved. And more importantly, I also want to remember it for myself later if I accidentally erase anything in here. Okay, so as you see, the thinking process is it takes a lot of time, right? And now once we've sorted that thinking process out, just thinking out loud with you, we can go in there and start to adjust our columns a little grid a little bit more. It would be ideal if like this grid aligned here, but that's okay. We know we need to place another column in there. But how about two in a line? Not really. So I won't worry about this edge one here. So let's start from this edge here. So what are we using here? Let's just double check. 7.5 meters. So that's a very comfortable grid size. It's not too small. It's not too large. It's comfortable. What does that mean? It's fairly efficient and fairly cheap, meaning the span members, the beams between the columns, they don't need to be too large, too heavy. So it's a bit more of an efficient structure in that respect. We can always go a little bit wider if we want to, but I think it seems to work pretty well for us here. So let's increase the number of members here. Okay, to something like that. So that is 1.5 meters away from our cursor, our external edge. So that works fairly well. Okay. Now in the other direction, we have only something like this here. That's the base of our core, right? And now we'll go ahead and we'll have to modify a couple of columns so they're in the right position. How are we going to do that with the columns to keep them parametric? Because at this point, we definitely don't want to go in there and like put columns everywhere. We want to keep this like as seamless as possible. First off, let's keep putting columns everywhere. Not everywhere, but where we need to. So put that column in there. And this is going to get our 15.5 angle, side angle. And let's do the same thing here. So I'm going to go as close to the edge as possible and then push that back 1.5 meters. So we have like a nice alignment. Now that is going to align ideally with whatever these are doing. So that spacing might be a bit different. Well, it seems to, yeah, more or less align. I'm not going to resolve it perfectly. Right. I think in this case, what might work even better for us is a line. So I'm going to put the cursor, Shift S, cursor to selected, Shift A, draw a curve or a mesh. I always like to start with a mesh line. So I'm going to rotate this 15.5 degrees in the negative direction. Go inside of here. Control R to create a loop cut. Control I to select the inverse, X, and then edges. Just so we have this edge over here. And let's move it 1 meter. So that corner is exactly aligned. So what am I doing here? So the vertices are going to be exactly aligned to where we need to have our columns. So it's still a bit more parametric, but also with more flexibility. Wow, I think we have a perfect alignment here. Not quite. So that alignment is over there. I'm just looking at the location where we need to put that column. So over here, and now the way I'm going to do this is align these. By the way, that's a large span. That's a very large span. How big is this? Probably too large. Edge length 8.5. Okay, that's fine. We can handle that. But this one here definitely needs to be subdivided into 2. So with this edge selected, right click and subdivide. So now we have column there, column there. Let's continue with this kind of colonnade setup. So let's extrude something to, well, let's do the same way. Something like this and subdivide. Just so we get like a nice even edge. And now I can delete that vertex over here. And we need a column here somewhere, right? So we put a column in there. Oh, by the way, this needs to step back, set back 1.5 meters or so. And now we're going to need a column in the edge. Here, there's going to be quite a few columns that are very close. We might not need that. I think they might be able to sort that out with just these columns. So that's our colonnade in this side. Well, let's use the same kind of setup that we have with the front colonnade we have on the other side. Okay, so we're going to have a column here. First off, let's move that 1.5 meters away. 1.5 meters away. Okay, so that needs to, well, let's draw that line out just so we understand. And now let's get that intersection. Good. We got that. Move that somewhere over here. And now let's make this a nice grid. So it's something that works nice. So 7.5 meters. It's quite a bit, 7.5 meters, isn't it? This is not very wide, I suppose, in this area. So is that right? 7 point. Oh. Oh, okay. That needs to snap to there and now go to 7.5. Okay. And extrude one more, and that's just going to the corner. And here we don't need to be that generous. That can be like, you know, 0.5 meter setback. In fact, 1 meter is probably a lot more optimal than 1.5 meters to be set back. But we already drew it in some places, so we're just going to keep it that way. Let's look at now, how is this going to work on this side? So we want to align as much as we can, you know, to these sides. So we'll have, you know, the grid is going to be doing this over here. I think, well, it can do whatever it wants. Maybe it can do that as well. So spanning all kinds of different ways, because why is that? Because that's a diagonal. That's still a pretty big grid spacing, and I don't know. That's something that's definitely, again, probably outside. But hold on. This is not a lot. This is only 7 meters. So that's working perfectly fine for us. And then we only need one more over there. Okay, and what is that? We can get rid of that. We've got this, and yeah, so these lines, we're gonna do a very cheeky thing with geometry nodes. So let's go to geometry nodes. New columns. Super simple, right? So we create, we can use one of the original ones, so we can get like the object info from there, or we can just create, because it's a very simple thing that we're doing here. So mesh circle. I think the radius is 0.3. Wow, no, the radius is 0.15 because the diameter is 0.3, and so we do an instance on points. So instance on points. We put that in there. And this is our instance, and that's it. It cannot be more straightforward than that, right? So if I hide that, starting to eat my words, we see with a grid, we show it. That's where they are. That's where we end up. Excellent. Now we can get rid of those. I thought we had more grids in there. We do. No, that's the grid we need. I'm getting a little bit confused here. That's the grid we don't need. Let's get rid of that. And let's enable this here. M, by the way. It's a nice hotkey to know. So with M, we can mute some of these instances over here. Okay. So we've got colonnades everywhere. So if we hide our sketches, annotations, we should only see the grid where we need it. And in fact, here we have something that's very closely aligned, but we're going to get rid of that. Here, I think with the grid in general, we might do like a similar thing. We just do like lines that are subdivided. So we just have the vertices, and there we use like one column, which is going to be our block. So that's going to be our column block here. Okay, so what do we have here? So I hope you notice, like, there's so many different ways to do things, right? So here, you know, that array also doesn't work because the spacing becomes a little bit more custom. Cool. So we're going to end it here. You get the point of these. I'm going to do the rest of the colonnades offline, right? So we're going to have like a nice column grid for the next session. And in the next session, we're going to look back now at the setbacks and to see whether they make sense with our column grids, right? So mostly what I'm concerned is about these kinds of things here, whether they actually not the big ones. The big ones could be okay because they're like almost halfway distance to the other place, but it's these here. And, you know, we're not terribly concerned about them, but just having something that we call a sanity check, right? To make sure that this works. So hopefully you got the point of how, and I think, yeah, I had a really interesting comment. I can't remember where it was. I think it was on YouTube. Like I posted like a nice video about, I'll show it to you. Just a second while I bring it up. There it is. Love reading these columns, right? So it's just a snapshot of what I was showing here. But somebody said Blender is not the best because section. Actually, that's true, right? So sections are a bit difficult, but we can do them with the same way with booleans that we're doing here. Yeah, it's just, you know, a couple of extra steps. So definitely a bit of truth in there. But here, you need to first make plans, so I don't think Blender is a good tool for architecture design. Great comment. I love it, you know, love it. It's true, right? But at the same time, it's not, because that person clearly doesn't know how to use Blender, and that you can draw floor plans, right? Or I mean, you can even import floor plans. You don't need to have that kind of floor plan, but you can clearly see from what we've demonstrated in this class that in this video, this live design session, that it's completely possible to work out your floor plans while in Blender, like we were showing here. Fairly basic floor plan in this case, but the sketching is the same no matter what, right? And in fact, it might be the best for doing floor plans because we can sketch around, right? You cannot do that anywhere else that I'm aware of. I'm sure maybe some programs can do it, but no, not to this like level of freedom to be able to sketch inside of your 3D viewport. Doesn't happen. So yeah, oh, I can't stop talking about Blender, but I have to now. So thank you guys for joining us for this live session. And again, if you like to support us, the files are on Patreon, right? So let's go to patreon.com/uhstudio. And I post, the sessions here, some behind the scenes videos, so those kinds of things where you can check out the progress, of all the videos. It's also a good place to, follow the full progress. We also have Discord, right? So that's it's in the link below, so you can check out this Discord, so you keep in touch with like all the communication across Studio Academy as well. And see you next time. Bye.